This is Big Red. If anyone hears me, tell my wife I love her. The thing is, in the truck, I can't shake it. I can't. The CB radio crackled. Then silence. That was the last thing anyone ever heard from Jack Big Red Carlson. 3 days later, his semi-truck was found abandoned on Highway 666, the infamous Devil's Highway. The rig was still running, the trailer still full, but Jack was gone. The police found no signs of struggle, no blood, no footprints leading away from the vehicle. Nothing except for one eerie detail. Jack's boots were placed neatly beside the road, as if he had stepped out of them and vanished into thin air. To this day, truckers who drive that cursed highway say they still hear his voice over the CB radio, whispering in the static. Some say if you're out there alone at night, you might even see his truck still driving, its headlights cutting through the fog, driverless, searching for another soul to take. But what really happened to Jack Carlson? This is his story. Jack had been a trucker for almost 20 years. He had driven through blizzards in Colorado, tornadoes in Texas, and sandstorms in Arizona. Nothing scared him, not even the stories about Highway 666. He didn't believe in ghosts. The job that night was a straightforward haul, a refrigerated truck full of beef from Albuquerque, New Mexico, to Los Angeles, California. It wasn't his usual route, but dispatch had promised him double pay if he could deliver by morning. The only problem, the fastest way to LA required cutting through Highway 666, a stretch of road notorious for strange accidents, truckers vanishing, and paranormal sightings. Jack's dispatcher had joked, "Just don't stop for any hitchhikers and you'll be fine." Jack chuckled, rolling his eyes. Ghost stories, that's all they were. But as he crossed onto the highway, something felt wrong. The air inside the truck became thick and heavy, like driving into a pressure chamber. His headlights barely cut through the dense, swirling fog, which clung to the road like ghostly fingers. The towering trees along the highway seemed to bend inward, their branches twisting unnaturally, as if watching him. He reached for his CB radio. "Breaker, breaker, anyone out here tonight?" Static. Then, a whisper. "Turn back, Jack." Jack froze. His grip tightened on the wheel, his breath slow and deliberate. The radio crackled again. "You shouldn't be here." Jack slammed the radio off. Probably just another trucker messing with him. Right. Then he saw it. The black car. It started as two small red lights in the darkness. At first he thought it was just another car, but something felt off. The car had no headlights on, yet it kept perfect pace with his semi-truck for nearly 30 miles. Jack adjusted his rearview mirror. Those red dots weren't taillights, they were eyes. His stomach twisted. "Breaker, breaker, this is Big Red. Anyone out here on 666? Got a tailgater creeping me out?" Silence. Jack pressed harder on the accelerator. The truck groaned, the RPM gauge climbing. Then, the car was gone. Just like that. He scanned the highway. No turnoffs, no roads, just miles of empty desert. His arms prickled with goosebumps. Then, out of nowhere, the fog thickened. A dark shape appeared directly ahead. A man standing in the middle of the road. Jack's foot slammed the brakes, tires shrieking as the truck skidded. The man didn't move. Jack flipped on his high beams. And that's when he saw it. The hitchhiker wore a dirty trucker cap, his clothes torn and ragged. His face looked decayed, skin peeling like charred paper. But his eyes were the worst part. Black, endless, a pit of nothingness. And yet, he grinned. Jack's throat tightened. His instincts screamed, "Drive! Get out of here!" But something held him there. The hitchhiker raised his hand and pointed directly at Jack. And then, he was gone. Jack's hand shook as he threw the truck into gear. He had barely driven 100 feet when... A whisper from inside the truck. You shouldn't be here, Jack. Jack's blood turned to ice. Cold, raspy breathing filled the cab. Jack's eyes flicked to the passenger seat. It was empty, but in the rearview mirror, something sat in his sleeper berth. A shadowy figure, its head tilted slightly, watching him. Jack couldn't move. His knuckles turned white, gripping the wheel. Then the radio crackled. Big Red, get off the road. Now! Jack froze. It was his own voice. His pulse pounded in his ears. He was losing his mind. Then, headlights ahead. A black semi-truck barreling straight at him. Jack yanked the wheel, his tires screeching against the cracked asphalt as he narrowly avoided a head-on collision. The black truck thundered past, its taillights vanishing into the darkness of the desert highway. For a split second, he saw the driver. His blood ran cold. It was himself, a perfect copy of Jack Carlson, gripping the wheel with an eerie stillness. The same weathered face, the same worn-out trucker cap. But the eyes, hollow, black, empty pits that swallowed the dim glow of the dashboard. And then, it was gone. Jack's breath came in short, ragged gasps. His hands, still clenched around the steering wheel, were slick with sweat. His heart pounded so violently that he could feel it in his throat. He forced himself to take deep breaths, but it did nothing to slow the panic creeping up his spine. His fingers trembled as he reached for the CB radio, his voice unsteady as he pressed the button. "Breaker, breaker, this is Big Red. I need help. I think something's in my truck." Silence, then static. A deep crackling distortion filled the cabin, a sickening hum that sent chills through his entire body. Then, his own voice replied. But it wasn't coming from the CB. It was coming from the passenger seat. "No one can help you, Jack." His stomach twisted. Slowly, hesitantly, he turned his head. And there, sitting in the seat beside him, was himself. A perfect copy, black eyes gleaming in the dark, a twisted grin curling at the corners of his lips. Jack opened his mouth to scream, but the lights on the highway flickered and vanished, and the road swallowed him whole. Jack pulled over, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. His breath came in shallow gasps, his heart hammering against his ribs. The old truck rumbled to a stop on the side of the deserted road, its headlights cutting through the suffocating darkness of the desert night. He shoved the door open and stumbled out, his boots crunching against the dry, cracked earth. The air was still, too still. No wind, no distant coyote calls, just silence. A heavy, unnatural silence that pressed down on him like an unseen weight. Then, footsteps, slow, deliberate. Jack froze, every muscle in his body tightening. His breath hitched. He turned sharply, scanning the emptiness behind him. Nothing. Just the vast moonlit desert, stretching endlessly in all directions. His pulse thundered in his ears. Maybe it was just his imagination. Maybe the exhaustion was playing tricks on him. Then suddenly, cold fingers wrapped around his throat. Jack gasped, his hands flying to his neck, but the grip was inhuman, strong, unyielding. A crushing force lifted him off the ground, his boots kicking helplessly in the air. His vision blurred, the world spinning as his lungs screamed for air. The last thing he saw was his truck, sitting there with the door wide open, waiting. Then, darkness. 3 days later, another trucker found Jack's rig. The driver's seat was empty. Only Jack's boots remained on the road. The CB radio crackled. "This is Big Red. If anyone hears me, tell my wife I love her. The thing is, in the truck, I can't shake it. I can't..." Then silence. Jack was never seen again. But truckers say, if you listen carefully, you can still hear Big Red's voice whispering in the static.